Dave Dujanovic. Special coverage of the top local story.
In just a few minutes, we're going to speak to a family member of a man by the name of Michael Brown, 38 years old, a father. 2 young sons witnessed the final moments of his life when he was punched in the head after a road rage incident escalated. That was one incident in Lehigh. We have yet another totally separate and unrelated incident of a road rage death. It appears to be related to road rage in Clearfield, Dave.
And I think this is such an important topic because we have all been there. There's not one of us that hasn't cut somebody off or been frustrated when somebody cuts us off or merges without using their blinker and they brake check us. This is happening every single day. Of course it is. We have to address what our response is. And I don't think we're doing a good enough job of talking about how to cope with some of these things.
Yeah, it's just calm down. Calm down. The situation in Clearfield, far different than what happened in Lehigh. So in Clearfield, I want to just touch on that for a moment. It appears there was some sort of an accident when one of the drivers left the scene, and then the other driver took off behind him and followed him around. He was on with 911 too. The driver in the trailing vehicle, the tailing vehicle, was on with 911, and then a 60-year-old man stops his car, gets out of the car, and then walks back to the car of the younger driver, and that's when the shooting occurs. And it's a 60-year-old man who's dead in that situation. Then we have a separate incident that happened on Sunday in Lehigh, and that's one that involves his 38-year-old father. Sons were in the car, 8 and 10-year-old sons. And there's an incident that happens, on the road, and then he's tailed into a neighborhood, gets out of the car, and it goes to blows. And Michael takes one in the head, according to what we've heard from police and from witnesses, and he died. He died as a result of this.
Which is so shocking because whenever we think about deaths in road rage incidents, I think, it had to have involved a gun, right? A fist fight's not going to do it, right? That's so common. It happens all the time. There's no way a fist fight can turn into somebody's death, right? And this is a perfect example of you never know what your punch could do, or if you get knocked down, you hit your head, it can just be the most catastrophic of results.
The man accused of throwing the punch was taken to jail. Greg Skordas, you know him as our legal analyst here at KSL. You've also been retained as the spokesperson for the family of Michael Brown, who's the victim here, who passed away. We're speaking to you more. Well, in that capacity, but this is absolutely tragic. I saw a picture of Michael, posted it to my Facebook page. Looks like he's alongside his wife there, and now she's a widow, and 2 little boys are fatherless.
Yeah, beautiful family, Debbie. Been married for 19 years, 10 and 8-year-old boys who unfortunately were both in the car at the time of the incident. A hardworking guy, family man, and he's got extended family who have just been wonderful and wonderfully supportive of his now widow and children. It's really been, if there's any good that you can imagine out of something so horrible, it's just that the family has rallied around, and they're, by all accounts, just a really wonderful family.
Greg, so often when we talk about these kind of aggressive road rage incidents and how quickly it can escalate, the state of Utah has tried to do some things about it. But can you just walk us through, maybe legally speaking, obviously de-escalation key above all, but what are the punishments for road rage?
Yeah, and it depends really on the outcome. In this case, I believe that it's being investigated right now as a homicide. We have been in touch with law enforcement, whether or not they end up taking it to that extent. remains to be seen. Of course, the Utah County Attorney's Office will ultimately weigh in on what, if any, charges are filed. But in any case where there is a confrontation between individuals and one party ends up deceased, police investigate that as a homicide, as they should, and as they almost have to. And we'll see where that investigation ends up. But right now, law enforcement isn't telling us a lot, except that they're working on the case. They've been very supportive so far, but haven't been able to share anything about the details of their investigation.
When we look at data from road rage incidents, it would appear that most of them happen between the hours of 5 and 7 p.m., afternoon commute hours. You're on your way home after work during the week. But this one is unusual, Greg, in that when it comes to statistics anyways, in that it happens on a Sunday. Can you give us some sort of indication about what was going on in the moment, where Michael was going, where he was coming from?
I can't, and we don't know a whole lot about the details of it. We do know that he had his boys in the car at the time, and that he lives at Eagle Mountain, so it happened in Lehigh, so not far from home. And, just the confrontation took place. The family only knows that it ended up with fisticuffs and ended just as badly as you could imagine. But we don't know too much about the details leading up to the incident yet, Debbie.
We have a little bit from the witnesses, or a witness, Debbie Worthen from KSL 5 Television, was able to talk to somebody that was there. And I want to play a little bit of how he described it for you, Greg.
I think like the moment that I saw the children's face, I think that was just like life-changing for me and kind of just put everything in a different perspective.
Jace had a hard time sleeping after seeing the scene.
I think both of the men were at wrong and at fault for what had happened, and they both fought, but it's the children that witnessed that and are seeing their father lying on the ground. I wish that on nobody.
So, Greg, as the police is investigating this, what are some of the things that they are looking for? This witness says, I think both guys were in the wrong, even though, one paid the ultimate price. What are some of the things that the police will be looking at?
Yeah, that's a great question. They'll be looking at the conduct of both individuals, and they'll be looking at the relative conduct. And, of course, if people are in combating and one person is defending themselves, I think the police will be looking at whether or not there's a self-defense argument here, or whether or not one party just went much further than they should have under the circumstances. So, yeah, we'll let the law enforcement do their investigation and let them finish that. But I think everything is on the table here, from no charges at all up to negligent homicide, or perhaps even something like a manslaughter.
What I think about is how quickly lives have changed. I mean, Greg, just think, forever. These two little boys, a father lost his life, and now there's a man waiting to find out if he's going to face homicide charges that could have put him away for a long time, Greg.
Yeah, and his life will change forever, too, no matter what the consequences. Just having to live with the realization that you caused something like this, it's got to be horrible for everybody. And I think two families are going to have just going to suffer for a very long time.
Greg Skordas, thank you for joining our KSL legal analyst.
Yeah, what are your thoughts, Dave?
It's such a sad situation. It's hard to even be objective about this, because I think we can all put ourselves in this family's shoes. Hey, losing a father, the children, the widow, but also we've all been there. We've all road raged on some level, whether it's aggressive driving or brake checking or doing something and letting things escalate. We've all been there. So I think the reason this resonates and this hits so close to home is I think we can put ourselves into these shoes of probably both of these men, and to remind ourselves that this is why we have to discuss it and talk about it and teach it in schools from driver's ed on up, about the importance of calming down, avoiding retaliation.
Speaking of walking in those shoes, we've all been in that situation, but nobody more so today than the family of Michael Brown. His sister-in-law is going to join the show in just a few moments. We found out earlier this morning when we were reporting on that we here at Broadcast House have a connection to his sister-in-law. She works with us, and she is in studio. Cindy Brown will be joining us in just the next few minutes to fill us in on more details about what led up to this horrible situation on Sunday that took the life of her brother-in-law. When we got word here this morning at Broadcast House that a man by the name of Michael Brown had passed away from injuries he sustained when he got punched as a road rage incident escalated in Lehigh, we had no idea that we would have such a personal affiliation with the family. And it turns out his sister-in-law came down to studio earlier. She works with the Deseret News upstairs. She's the agency manager. Cindy Brown walked into studio and said, Michael was my brother-in-law. And we are just all so heartbroken about what happened in Lehigh on Sunday.
And Cindy, thank you so much for joining us. I know the family just must be going through an awful time right now. But I think it's important so often when we talk about these news stories, sometimes we're a little bit separated from it, right? We don't know the stories and we don't hear the families. We know intellectually that the families are devastated, but to actually talk to your family, can you just help describe how everyone's doing right now? I mean,
Sure.
utter devastation,
Sure.
obviously.
I think no one ever thinks that this is going to happen in their family, right? And so when we got the call on Sunday, it was devastating. Mike is very dedicated to his children and his wife. He comes from a very large family. He has 9 brothers and sisters, and is not a violent person in any way. And so it's very difficult for the family to wrap their heads around, kind of how this escalated so quickly and ultimately how it resulted in him passing on.
And his 8 and 10-year-old son were in the car when this was happening.
Yeah.
Can you give us any details on how they're doing right now? And I'm sure they're just absolutely devastated.
I think the most important thing to remember is how Mike was dedicated to those 2 boys, and he would do anything to protect them. And we think that's what his thought process was as he was involved in this incident, that he just wanted to protect the boys. Fortunately, they were a witness to the entire scene. They were actually on their way to meet their mom for lunch, and then they were going to go to the Bees game because Michael coaches the boys in baseball. And they were going to be the team on the field that night. And instead, they ended up in a police station and having to recount what they saw, and it was terrible.
I think the escalation is what terrifies me so much about this because, Cindy, I've brake checked somebody before.
I think we all have.
I've cut somebody
Sure,
off. I've
sure.
merged without. I've been distracted. All these things that would infuriate somebody, and I've had people do the same thing to me. Where they are yelling at me and flipping me off. We've all been there.
Sure.
But I think, as you were saying, no one thinks it can escalate to something like this. But this happens so often in this nation.
Yeah, I think that we've lost civility to some extent, and we've forgotten that we're all humans, and unfortunately, in this circumstance, Michael was trying to protect his boys and trying to get to Mandy and go on with their day, and I am certain that he didn't wake up thinking, today's the day I'm gonna say goodbye to my family, and so it is such a loss for us because he was such a dedicated father. He was so committed to the boys. I don't know that I've seen many fathers spend as much time and effort with their children as Michael did. And so I'm sure they're going to feel his loss for a really long time.
We're speaking live right now with Cindy Brown. She works with us here at Broadcast House. She's the agency manager at the Deseret News. She's also the sister-in-law of 38-year-old Michael Brown, who lost his life. He took a blow to the head in a road rage incident. And it gets to the point, Cindy, where these Michael and it sounds like the other driver got out of their cars. Mm-hmm. Do you know, or can you share with us what led up to this moment?
The only people that were really there were the 2 boys, right? And obviously they've given their statements to the police, and the witnesses that were at the scene have given their statements to the police. And we're so thankful for Lehigh Police Department. They're doing an exceptional job in making sure that they dot all of their I's and cross all of their T's. What we know from the boys is that they were in a construction zone and they had just laid gravel down on the road, and Michael was going slow because his car is new. And I don't know if you've had a new car, but you don't want to get rock chips, right? So I'm sure that that's what happened. And he turned off to go into a neighborhood, and the other person followed him into the neighborhood. And that's where Michael was worried. He thought that he wasn't able to get away, and Michael got out of the car, and that's all we know. We really don't know a whole lot because none of us were there. We only have what the boys say and what the witnesses in the neighborhood were able to witness. And so we're going to let the police do their investigation and come up with all of the evidence that they need. And we trust that they'll do the right thing. As
devastating and heartbreaking as this story is, there's a reality that is starting to set in now that the boys don't have their father. Financial concerns as well. I mean, all of this stuff starts playing in addition to all of the heartbreaking loss of just losing a loved one.
Yeah, it's hard to think about. I mean, he was 38 years old, so he's relatively young in his career, trying to support his family. Unfortunately, he was a contractor for a company and didn't have life insurance. So this is devastating for his wife. The financial consequences of this are going to be long lasting. And we started a GoFundMe page for him and for the boys, because we know that his wife is going to need an amazing amount of support. And we live in a community that is so supportive, and we're so grateful for that. And our family's really rallied around her and tried to make sure that she has all of the support that she needs. Her parents came in from out of town, and she's got siblings that are flying in. So Mandy's surrounded by a whole family. We have a very large family that has grown up in this community, and so we feel really lucky for that.
In honor of your brother-in-law, Cindy, is there a message that you'd want to send to the rest of our community about road rage and calming down behind the wheel?
Yeah, I think we have to get back to civility, and anger is never the answer. It's a temporary emotion, and we've all been there. We all get frustrated, and it's hard right now, right? Because we're in an economy that's hard. Dollars are being stretched really thin in a lot of households, and so tempers can be very much at the surface. But I would say that when you're behind the wheel of a car and you have children involved, or even when you don't have children, that you remember that there's a family on the other side of whatever action you choose to take, that there's a family that's suffering now because we've lost our brother and someone that we loved very, very much. And so please just take a minute, take a breath.
Cindy Brown, thank you for joining us. So sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Is working with us here at Broadcast House with the Deseret News, but a heartbreaking story, and please, send our love to his wife and his boys.
Yeah, and
I will. Thank you.
Thank you for making sure we were aware. We didn't know of the connection until you walked in studio earlier today. That Michael Brown was your brother-in-law, and this has taught me a lot. And just sitting here and talking to you, it's not like I go out and road rage every day, but we all can have those moments. And I had one about 30 years ago, and I was so lucky the way it ended in my favor. We're going to talk about lessons learned here straight ahead. Cindy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And one of those two fatalities involving road rage that Dan Bomas was just referencing from our newsroom involved a man by the name of Michael Brown. He died, took a punch to the head, 38 years old. Kids were there on the scene in the car when he got out of the car, and he was confronted by another man after a road rage incident escalated. And we just spoke moments ago to his sister-in-law, Cindy Brown, who happens to work with us here at Broadcast House, Dave.
And there's still so much that we don't know about this. We're getting one side of it, but it is such a heartbreaking story because the two boys that are 10 years old and 8 years old, they were, their dad was their baseball coach. They were going to a Bees game later that night. They witnessed this happen.
They were going to be on the field that night.
Yeah, they were going to be honored as the team.
Cindy mentioned that they're still trying to, unravel what happened, but they do know that they were driving through a construction zone and that it appears a man behind them followed Michael and his kids into the neighborhood.
He turned off to go into a neighborhood, and the other person followed him into the neighborhood, and that's where Michael was worried. He thought that he wasn't able to get away, and Michael got out of the car, and
then they get into a fist fight, according to Debbie Worthen with KSL Television had interviewed one of the witnesses. He said both guys were going at it. The witness, at least from their perspective, said they were both in the wrong. But nevertheless, when the devastating outcome of someone dying, the details of who's to blame, is just such a regrettable incident. We have to be able to do better and figure out what is happening that's causing us to be so outraged.
Well, Cindy brought it up. She brought it up. We're under a lot of stress. We're under a lot of pressure. Financial pressures are growing. Maybe you had a really bad day at work, and then somebody does one little thing on the road, and you are taking your anger out on them. And that's how these things end so horribly. So now families are devastated. Two families. The suspect who was, hauled off to jail, waiting to see if he'll be criminally charged. He will be criminally charged most likely, but what he'll be criminally charged with, is it, manslaughter, is it homicide? His life is totally different. Michael's life is no more. And his boys witnessed this. And Cindy said something in our discussion just a few moments ago with her that really stood out to me, because I'm going to categorize myself as a road rager 30 years ago. I was on the verge. I'm going to tell you what I did. And while I'll never do it again, especially after listening to Cindy's plea to our community to calm down and think about that person behind the wheel that you're now angry at. They have a family too.
We have to get back to civility. And anger is never the answer. It's a temporary emotion. And we've all been there. We all get frustrated. And it's hard right now, right? Because we're in an economy that's hard. Dollars are being stretched really thin in a lot of households. And so tempers can be very much at the surface. But I would say that when you're behind the wheel of a car and you have children involved, or even when you don't have children, that you remember that there's a family on the other side of whatever action you choose to take. That there's a family.
I saw that UDOT had a list of things to do. I'll share it here in a minute, Debbie, of what you can do if you find yourself in a road rage incident. But I want to hear your story.
It was the early 90s. I know, because I remember I was driving that red Saturn that I'd bought, and it was late at night. I was heading home. I lived in South Salt Lake at the time. Maybe it was more. Anyway, I was heading in that direction. I was on 7th East, not too far from Liberty Park, and I'd pulled in the left-hand turn lane to make a left, and a woman hit my car. And I didn't know it was a woman at the time. Okay, I didn't know who it was. So think about that. It's, late at night, dark. I didn't know it was a woman. She hits my car. She takes off. Well, I'm going to give chase. I'm young. I'm a journalist. I'm about getting to the truth, right? And when you do something wrong, you stick around, you admit it, you work out the details, you call each other's insurance company. Whatever you do, you just work through it. You file a police report. You know the drill. So I gave chase. Now, it wasn't a high rate of speed because, again, I didn't know at the time it was a woman. I also didn't know she was probably like in her late 90s. Okay. But she's just weaving in and out of the neighborhood, and I think it's really suspicious. And I pursue her. And now I'm getting frustrated. I'm not quite angry. I don't know if I'm really a kind of person that gets super enraged on the road, but I get frustrated. So I was frustrated. I was on the verge of, bumper locking her in her driveway, getting out of my car and letting her, reading her the riot act. So she pulls into the driveway and gets out of her car. And I realized right then, oh my goodness, this is somebody's great grandmother. And she's scared to death of me. And she should have been.
So she was aware that you were following her?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I was out of my mind at that point, right? To be following her and weaving in and out of neighborhoods just to get her license plate. And who I didn't know if she had a gun. Of course, it's 30 years ago. I got to tell you, times were different back then. They were a lot different back then. Right now, I'm afraid if I brake check somebody or I don't let them in my lane, it could be the last time I see my family. Things are a lot different now. I was very blessed in realizing, talking to Cindy just moments ago, how blessed I was that incident did not escalate to what happened to Michael or what happens to other people when they're shot on the scene of a road rage incident. It's just life ends that fast. It's not worth it. It's just a thing. My car is just an object.
Yeah.
Was the damage that bad that I couldn't have gotten it fixed? Of course not. And even if it was, it's just an object. It's a thing. You can't.
That's why you have insurance,
yeah,
right?
You can't replace a human life. Nor. Also, I'm sure she's long gone now. She's, gone to the car lot in the sky. But what a horrible feeling for her. How scary for her.
Did you just drive off, or did you
No, I
talk
yelled
to her?
out my window. I yelled out my window.
Yeah.
And I left. I mean, I didn't confront her after that, but I yelled out my window. No, I'll never do that again.
A few tips from UDOT. If something does happen, they go ABC: avoid retaliation, breathe, and carry on.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they say. Another tip that they put in is avoid eye contact. Eye contact can be seen as confrontational. Look straight ahead. Do not react to provocative gestures or words.
Yeah. Yeah, I would just get out of there. You know what I mean? Just turn off the road and keep going and go home and hug your family and think about the Michael Browns in the world. These kids won't have another hug from their daddy.